Hello, everyone. It's time once again for Catalog and Cocktails, your honest, no BS, non salesy conversation about enterprise data management with as many cocktails as possible in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime product guy, data nerd, joined by Juan Cicada. Juan, how are you, man?
Tim, it's finally pack. And actually, let's figure out the logistics. Are we actually live here or not? That's what I'm trying to go figure out.
Yes.
Let's go figure this out thing. I don't know.
AWS is having some issues today, and so I'm curious if we can see ourselves online.
I am trying to I see something. If anybody looks like we are. It looks like we are. All right. This is happening here. All right. If people are listening to us, if you can say something in the chat. All right. Well, yeah, this is live. All right. Finally.
Excellent.
But it's not Wednesday, as I usually say. Well, Wednesday, middle of the day, middle of the end of the year. Whatever. It's just great to be back. So yeah, a lot of stuff has happened.
A lot is happening in the data world, in the AI world. We're excited to be now a part of ServiceNow, and they're still letting us do this thing where we drink cocktails and talk to data people. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it took a while just because of like our schedules have been so crazy. It was like summer break and still trying to go figure out what we're streaming here live. This will be pushed into the podcast sooner than later. But all right, excited to be here.
Juan, are you drinking something?
I am. Let's talk about cocktails. What are you? I did. This is a brand new thing. Never done it before.
You know, I usually go first. You go first. Tell me about your cocktail.
Okay, so if for folks who I've met with recently, they know that I've been testing out this new switching things with Liquor 43. But before that, I did a whole kind of a series of doing things with Aperol. So I'm like, screw it. I got both at home. So I actually have a little bit of Aperol, a little bit of Liquor 43. And I had whatever whiskey I had opened was actually Johnny Walker Black. I tried that, put a little bitter. It's actually, it's a little bit too sweet. Not surprising because it makes, but I think it's something to play with. I need to figure out how to kind of get more bitters in there or something. So that's what it is. It's very orangey-ish. So
I like that you're trying all sorts of different ways to use Liquor 43. You're like trying different angles, different combinations. I'm drinking a. It's essentially like a gin daiquiri, but it's got coconut syrup in it. It's coconut simple syrup, so it gives it kind of a frothiness as well, and some Hendrick's gin and also some lime. So keeping it kind of simple but very tasty.
that's an interesting mix right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Well, cheers to we're finally back and starting.
Cheers to this community, because we love being able to hang out with you and talk about interesting data things.
Cheers to everybody. All right. So I put a warm-up question here for us, which is 5 years. We've been doing this for 5 years. What's changed in our lives for the last 5 years? Tim? What's like the big change in your life?
My kids are getting older, and it's making me feel older. But that's one thing. Maybe on a non-personal note, I use Gen AI like all the time now. Like, it has become a part of my daily life to use it to help me refine my ideas, to help me take notes. I'll call that out as like a major way my life has changed in the last 5 years.
Well, I was going to say to the last 5 years, I'm going to keep it personal. I now have 2 little kids, and I just turned 40 on Friday. So that's a big milestone change for me. So
Happy birthday, Juan.
Thank you. That's a big thing, and been very reflective about like what's going on. Which let's dive in. So we wanted to kind of kick off this whole season with a reflection, because to be honest, the honest no BS is that the data world we're now part of ServiceNow, which means that we've actually have the huge opportunity to get exposed to so many more people and get out of our bubble. I mean, it's something that we've always talked about. We need to get out of our bubble. We need to get out of our bubble. And guess what just happened? We, Tim and I, our entire organization, we literally got put into an opportunity to talk to so many new people. And what's fascinating is that very quickly we realized, oh my God, if I thought that we were in a bubble, heck yeah, we were in a big freaking bubble. And it's to the point that we have conversations with folks who are saying like, what is data? What does structured data and unstructured data mean? And what is metadata? Like going back to basics. And I love like we talk about this stuff so much that we forget that we need to zoom out and then there's a bigger, broader world around it. So what we really want to go do is to kind of just give our perspective of what's happened in the last 5+ years. We're actually going to go more than that, but it was just cute to say 5 years. And kind of give our interpretation of history. And again, I think this is like Tim and I have been, we'll go back and forth. We did prepare kind of some sections we wanted to go through, but really, again, this is our interpretation, which again, other people will have different ways of viewing this or may disagree with our points of view and stuff. And I'll love to go call this out. But I think we want this episode to be a primer for any folks who are new to data. They're like, here's your crash course to get kind of up to speed of everything that's happened in the last 5+ years. So yeah, let's start.
Yeah, let's dive in.
So you want to kick us off like here's setting the stage or?
Yeah. So I think to start the stage, let's zoom all the way out for just 1 second. I think we all are just trying to leverage data to get value and make value for our business. And so I think that's an important grounding in as we go through and talk about some of the history here, that it can feel like it's all about technology, but I think this has all been technology in search for how to bring value to the business, and how to deal with the fact that things just aren't simple, right? I think we all hoped that they were simple. I think if you go back in time to the 90s, right, when this idea of data warehouses was starting to become much more popularized. Obviously, it came out, the idea of it was before then, but it started to become popularized, where there was a hope that if you stick all your data in a data warehouse and pop some crystal reports on top or pick your favorite tool of the time, that it was going to help us, run our business. And that was the world of data, was like warehouses and analytics. And we know that, things got a lot more complicated than that.
So and there is a particular episode, the one that we did with Bill Inman, the father of the data warehouse. Mm-hmm. And I think he goes into this and says, look, for the first time, he's been talking about the data warehouse, but somebody realized saying, hey, if I had all this data about a customer, that could help me go sell more things to that customer. So that's kind of where it all started, and about why we want to go bring data together. At the end of the day, it's in the service of your business and your customers to go drive revenue, really to go drive revenue, right? Instead of like then reduce costs up. But I always say, what is the value of business? Making money, saving money, mitigate risk. But it's always been for like driving revenue. So we see kind of that, it's called that first chapter of like, this is mid-90s, classic data warehouses started to come up. And also because it's the rise of the web, parentheses, my big pet peeve, it's the web, not the internet, the web, e-commerce. So all of this happens and we start generating more data. We want to know more about our customers. And that's when you start seeing, and I think a thread that we'll be seeing is that we've been focusing so much on technology. It's like we need warehouses. So we already had relational databases.
We had our Teradata, our Oracle, or Netezza, et cetera, right?
And those databases were focused more for these data warehouses, this OLAP approach. So you started seeing things for OLTP, for transactional databases. And now we're seeing kind of this shift of saying, wait, we need to do some new types of analytics, which requires some new type of performances. And we need these new type of databases, these data warehouses. So that's that first thing. And then we start seeing kind of the initials, how to go model data. And we start realizing that data needs to be transformed in a way such that it can be optimized for these analytical types of questions. And that's why we start seeing transformations into things like star schemas and snowflake schemas, and think about Kimball and Ross and the Inman view of these things. And it was a big focus of ETL, right? Transforming things. I think ultimately, the promise here is that we're going to achieve a single version of that truth. Was that ever real, or was that just marketing, or whatever? What are your thoughts about where that happened?
I think that's a good question. I think we got good at solving very, very tight, specific problems around data. Perhaps it was actually a simpler time for data analysts because, you got to that one dashboard and that nightly batch run, it would run at like 2 o'clock in the morning. It would take an hour to complete and the batch load would happen. The reports would get updated. And life was a little simpler back then. So maybe in that sense, we did achieve something, but we all know that like as data has, in the same way software is eating the world, data is eating the world. And we wanted to do a lot more with data. And I think you mentioned, the web companies, right? I think especially about like Google and Yahoo and, social media companies start to come to the fore, like Facebook, Twitter, right? They really push the envelope on what some of this traditional architecture can do, this sort of traditional data warehouse approach. And that's when I think we started to see this transition into essentially a second age of data, which is what everyone lovingly refers to as big data, right? The big data age. In our notes, we kind of call it the age of scale. And that's where you saw that these big web companies were pushing the envelope on quantity of data, right? We started to talk about, hey, it's not just about gigabytes anymore. It's about zettabytes and exabytes of data. And it's not just about structured data. What about all this unstructured data that we have? How
But
do we tap into that?
but more into that, it was on the unstructured side during that time. I think this now goes into the late 2000s, early 2010s is more about the log analytics you're doing. But one comment here that what Martin just said here was there's always more than one version of the truth, and I'd argue that at that time there was a perception was that there was a version of the truth, a single version. We need to achieve that single version of the truth. And I think we've later learned that it's harder to go do. And there isn't because there's multiple versions because we live in so many silos. And I think that happens is that it's called the illusion that we will have that one data warehouse that will integrate all the data, be able to have that truly 360-degree view of our customer and so forth. But then we started seeing that things didn't match, or like when we were trying to go do the ETL and the transformations, things didn't match again. So then assumptions were made and things happened, right? So I think that was something that was kind of the assumption at that time. Also, very quickly, talk about the BI tools at that time, because that has also been a shift.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about Crystal reports, right? There's like the original SAP business objects, stuff like
Cognos hits the scene.
Cognos, or the first versions of MicroStrategy, now Strategy, like that was kind of that first generation of BI. But then comes the age of scale, and the way I interpret this history here, I'm curious about you because you actually had a lot of this was a big part of your early part of your career. But so from my perspective, I look at this as the Googles of the world, literally Google and then Amazon, all these, they said, hey, the traditional kind of database infrastructure does not scale for what a Google and a Facebook needs. So they come up with new techniques. Google has their famous paper big table, right? And then Meta also has some other things they go do. And folks at Yahoo do things, right? The first version of Hadoop comes out of Yahoo, I believe. But they are building these systems because they have a problem of scale. And then we were kind of seeing the industry analysts. This is cool. I don't know how this all starts up. The venture capitalists, right? There's like, the promise that with the web, we're generating more and more data, the logs, we're going to get more logs. Like, no, this isn't going to scale. This is not going to fit inside of our Oracle databases, warehouses anymore. We need to have a much bigger scaling. And this is where we have Hadoop and Spark and all that stuff. And also it was like, well, we have all this data and we need to do stuff with the data and data science. And this is where data scientists become the sexiest job, right? I think it's that paper in 2012 that comes out. So it's just like this mix of like, we can put all this data together, but we're going to do amazing things, but all the amazing things has to be in all this data. And it's such a bigger infrastructure you need to go do. So then we forget, I don't know, but you share your history here.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to give myself a very specific age here in terms of my geology. But, this was about the time around 2010 or so where I personally really started to heavily get into data. Actually, I started working for a company that some of you in the audience may have heard of before. People who were deep in the data community at the time thought fondly of a company called InfoChimps, which was this a place where you could put any data in the world onto sort of this shared marketplace. And we actually started to do a lot of very interesting things around Hadoop and Elasticsearch and some of these streaming technologies very early on when it just first started being open sourced. And so you had Hadoop on the scene, right? Hadoop was the big technology where Yahoo especially put out all these kind of thought papers out there on how you could do mass processing of semi-structured information at scale using Hadoop. And the tooling for it was terrible. It was like you could write Java jobs to do map reduce, and you had to understand the algorithms and the approaches to map and reduce data, and take any of your analytics and apply it to that paradigm. And then they tried to layer some tooling on top called Pig and things like that. Eventually, they layered a data warehouse approach on top of it called Hive, which still exists today, and it has evolved into more of a multi-purpose, doing SQL querying on top of data, and nobody really knew what they were doing. So InfoChimps was like, okay, well, we've got all this expertise in this big data stuff. We're going to do big data as a service. And I think this was such an interesting time because I'm sure there were moments of extreme hype before this, but the engine of hype that happened in this big data age was incredible. Companies, big and small, were seeing this technology called Hadoop, which we like to be honest, no BS on the show, right? And so let's really be reductionist about what Hadoop is. And this is not meant to be mean. It's just its origin story, right? Like it was created by web companies to analyze logs at scale, at massive scale, right? That's where it started. Obviously, it's gone a lot farther since then, right?
Remember the original demos were like a count. It was word counting, like how many times count how many times the word cat shows up.
I stuck a petabyte of data, and look, I can calculate the average in only 30 seconds. Like, oh my god, amazing, right? So it was this simple use case, simple technology, but the excitement was like, oh my god, what if all the data that your enterprise has, all of it, your documents, your images, what if you could put it all in one place? You dump it into this, what eventually we called the data lake, right? And we know now that there's some derogatory terms about how we would describe that now, but we put it into the data lake, and then your data scientists, they're going to come in and they're going to analyze it, and insights will pop out. Amazing insights that will run your business. And so people were buying Hadoop like crazy at that time, and probably many of you listening have still a very large Hadoop cluster in your company. Maybe you're using it heavily. I know many companies for a fact are not. But like so much excitement, right? And we know that ultimately led to some good stuff, but that was a huge hype period there.
So I know some people, and I call this the lost decade. How was this a lost decade of data? Because we did all this stuff, but actually going back to like the value, we spent so much time, so much money, so much resources. Did we get the value out of that? Like,
I mean, the ROI wasn't great, I would say, but I feel like the lost decade is too harsh. It was our tween years. We were finding ourselves. We were finding our identity around data. I think it was good. It was worthwhile. The hype was too high. Like we should have. And I think we're learning that a little bit. I know Gen AI has a lot of hype, and we'll talk more about AI shortly. But I feel like maybe a lot of us are still around in the data industry, and we feel that we were burnt a little bit in the past, and so we're being a little bit more careful. But I mean, it was some exciting technology got developed, right? Hadoop became Hive. If it weren't for Hadoop, we would have never had Spark, which kind of came out of that. And I think Spark was really, really impactful for really democratizing the ability to do really high scale data engineering and data science, right? So I think that was really valuable. And also, streaming became very commoditized during this period, right? Because if you look to the past, streaming technology like complex event processing and change event management, right? Like a lot of these technologies were much more proprietary. You'd be paying like millions of dollars per core for some of these like streaming kind of technologies. Mostly the financial industry is using them. Then you get things like Flume, which eventually kind of led the way to Storm, which kind of led the way to now, Spark streaming and Kafka. Like Kafka is very, very popular now, right? Uh, this is the time where those things really came to life, and now anybody can download, Kafka open source or use, your favorite cloud managed Kafka, and you can do pretty amazing streaming analytics at very low cost.
So I'm actually thinking we call this the age of scale, but I also call it the age of democratization.
Yeah.
Because this was, we need to be able to have a place where we can dump so much data, so then all our data scientists could go do things with our data and come up with amazing things.
Yeah.
And then I remember once I was working with some customer, and they were so excited about they had their big data science team presenting, and they showed all their insights. And at the end of the day, what they did was just so simple correlations. And they're like, well, if we see that if people buy this product A, they also end up buying product B, and they found all these things. And they were like, yeah, duh, because the promotion was called buy product A, we'll give you product B for free. And I'm like, by the way, you could have talked to us, we would have told you. And I think that was another thing that I realized that is a result of this age of democratization. It's like everybody can have access to data, but then people aren't talking to each other. And that was something that we saw that like, oh, we're going to go do all these things. And then when you present it after the fact, after you did all this work, it wasn't what people were expected. So I think that's happened. And one thing not to forget.
Unfortunately, I don't think we learned our lesson very quickly on that. I think another 10 years had to pass, but
Yeah. And I think hopefully people are paying attention to that part right now. Or I think we'll talk about when we talk into like the data product stuff. But the other aspect is analytics, right? So BI, and I think we saw this whole democratization of data, which has led to now these data lakes, and it's now easier. The technology can be scaled, but then you just have a bunch of data in there that you don't even know what you have, and don't understand it. And then I think also has been this democratization of analytics. Is like we also was the early kind of flavors of citizen data analysts and citizen data scientists, where anybody can go do things analysis with your data. And then what is the biggest complaint people have? One of the biggest complaints people have is like, I don't know which dashboard to look at, or I look at this dashboard, I don't know if I can trust it, or I see these numbers, they're different, don't match, and I got thousands of dashboards. So that is, we had this excitement of what we can do, but we never really thought about the repercussions if it would just really kind of explode so much, if we were like truly quote unquote successful in our democratization.
Yeah. So we have this very interesting dynamic then that happens I'll call it like the later half of the 2010s, right? Where you've got this now explosion of these data lakes, right? And the derogatory term data swamp starting to emerge, right? And then on top of that, you've got this incredible amount of I think self-service analytics is probably the phrase that a lot of people would remember in here. Also, citizen data science, right?
Yep.
So you've got your Tableau and your Click, and a number of different tools that came out during this period of time and popularized, right? A lot of them were around for a little bit, but they popularized during this period. Now anybody can build dashboards, and they can look pretty nice, right? So you got everybody can build dashboards, but the data is in this massive swamp. Right. And so this creates this huge divide, which I think is kind of the setup for where we see things start to go in the next chapter of this.
But another thing just reminded me is at the beginning, accessing your big data platform, data lake, wasn't easy. You had to know how to write code and write Java and write MapReduce jobs and stuff like that. And it was and one thing we also haven't
people just started building warehouses on top, right? Like Hive, like you had to create all the indexes and things like that.
So,
and
it's like, that's what we saw. And then one thing we haven't even touched here, which is part of this, is the whole NoSQL movement comes around too.
That's true.
Because remember, the big data was the 3 V's. The variety, the
volume, velocity,
and then added more
veracity and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. So then it was the variety, and it wasn't just any more tables. And then so this is where the NoSQL comes in, and you start seeing more columnar stuff. And then this is where things come in like JSON, and then you have graphs that come in, document databases, and
the rise of MongoDB.
And that one won. One in the sense that it's still a company out there, and it's a public company. And
yes.
So I think that's something that came out too. And then because it was originally people would say it was not SQL, because we don't need SQL anymore, because SQL was just old school and it was too structured and was
inflexible. Yeah.
But then we realized, and again, this goes back to the we're trying to democratize analytics. Still, people think in tables and columns and rows, and they want to be able to create, like your Tableaus of the world are talking SQL and stuff. So the irony of having a SQL layer over your NoSQL system. I remember I was working on a lot of research on how to put all these layers on top of layers and figure out how this all works. And anyways, that was we're just opening the box, closing the box, putting all this stuff in.
I will say that I had some fun during that period, because simple things were complicated, and so there was like all this work you had to do to think about, like, oh, we're gonna put the data here and we're gonna organize it like this, and we're gonna, it was fun to be like an architect at that time, but we weren't really creating a lot of value for
that's it. Well, again, I think part of the thing you'll see here is that it's just been really focused on the same business. The goal, business value here has been trying to accomplish the same, right? Like find insights that's going to generate more revenue, and the way we're doing it, we're just like, why are we making this so freaking complicated? Because we changed the requirements, but the requirements kind of weren't expected to attach to like the expectation of what was going to happen to the business. But in reality, we weren't even providing that much of a business value. So, but funding would still come along and stuff. And then I think that leaves us to the next, we'll call the from that age of scale, and now things got complicated, and we just need to simplify it. And then there's also, I think, kind of the starting here is a company called Snowflake.
Mm-hmm.
Snowflake is kind of the first to kind of do this whole, what we call the separation of storage and compute, because all these things are really tied together. And then we're saying, wait, I can keep my storage really cheap. You have things like S3 buckets, and I have my compute layer. And this separation is something that was traditionally, it's always been that same box. Your database puts all these things together. And now that we're going to the cloud, we need to have a way to leverage these things that we have in the cloud, like S3 bucket, S3 data stores, and then be able to put that compute engine where you can leverage different computes. And I think Snowflake comes and gives a rise of what we're calling the cloud data warehouses, and tried to somewhat simplify some of these things, because the cloud was meant to be to simplify. But I don't know. I think now we're seeing that we just either got too greedy and we made it super complicated. I don't know.
Well, in the backdrop here, all along the way, you've got the rise of like AWS, right?
True.
And now all of a sudden, infrastructure is becoming simpler and cheaper and more automated. And because of that, new architectures become possible in terms of how we manage our data storage and our data compute. And I think Snowflake did a very good job early on figuring out how to let you use essentially kind of blob storage, just like generic file storage, but then have the compute characteristics of a high performance data warehouse, and have those two things talk to each other well with decent IO, right? And so that was interesting because, we started off this conversation today with data warehouses, but it was installed on hardware in your data center. Now enter this age of simplicity, right? The beginning of the modern data stack, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now we're coming back to the data warehouse once again, but the infrastructure is different. Now it's in the cloud, and it's leveraging kind of this separation of storage and compute. And it's taking advantage of an opening where building and managing data warehouses is a little bit too complicated. And hey, here's a push button solution to make it really simple.
I'm actually here looking at an episode. I'm trying to remember when that was and who that was, but there was one about what is this modern data stack, because people were talking about it so much, and I forgot who it was with, but I remember that it was the message was, it's a modern data stack if you don't need a consultant, if you can kind of quote do it on your own. Because I think traditionally you would say, I'm going to go build up my data infrastructure, and you're not a tech company, whatever you need, but you need to build all your kind of data infrastructure to do reporting, BI analytics, you need to hire somebody else to go do that. I think the modern data stack, the goal is to say we're simplifying this such that you can actually bring in some data teams or your current data teams that you have, your current analyst teams, and make sure that they can go do that. It's going to be as simple that anybody can do it. And I think you did accomplish that with the Snowflakes and the Databricks of the world.
Yeah, you don't need a DBA. You don't need a hardware expert. You just need a data engineer or even a data analyst to just press the button.
Exactly. So that was it. And I think originally it was going to be more like and again, this is a shift of very now focus of before we did ETL and now we're going to go ELT. And now we see, I think part of this is the rise of DBT. I think DBT was they really found the niche of people trying to go do things simply who needed to go do some data transformation outside of the EL, because ETL used to be like this big, heavy job. You'd get Informatica was a big Google player with all these consultants doing this stuff. If you're trying to go simplify it, like you just put the data in EL, and you have tools like now Fivetran, right? Things which is part of the modern data stack, which is like one of the core companies of the modern data stack. DBT is the way you would do transformations, which by this way makes sense that these two companies are now merging together, and simplify that right there. And then you're like, I just have my dashboard creating that. But I think what happened was that the at that time we for many years we kind of deliberately put data modeling on the side, and I think that is a half a decade of loss, and it was because we just want to get from point A to point B faster, meaning I have data coming from all these sources. I'm going to dump in a lake. I'm going to transform in a way such I can have a way of putting it inside of my dashboard, and I'm done. Success was that I had data in a dashboard was going to go use, and they're going to drive insights with that.
Yeah. Garrett says here, lacking control and proper governance. That can mean a few things. One of it means no central approach to modeling.
Exactly. Garrett read my mind on that, because I think that's what happened is that we just goes back to like getting the excitement of like, oh, anybody can go do this, which I posit, should anybody really go do this? I mean, not anybody drives a car. You gotta learn how to drive a car, right? Not anybody creates bridges. You gotta like, I mean, you could, but I mean, you can hire a contractor for your house to go do things, but I mean, anybody can say they can go do that stuff, but do they really know? Should they be doing that stuff?
My wife doesn't want me to be doing the electric work in my house. That's a bad idea.
There you go. So just because you can, does that mean that you should? I think we did not ask ourselves that question.
In all of these eras, there were like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? And I think with the modern data stack, a couple of steps forward were one, more democratization, right? It was an extension of what happened in the previous decade to say, hey, now people can kind of do this themselves as a data analyst. You can have a person who can do your analytics also manage the infrastructure. That was very interesting, right? It didn't used to be that way. You needed more people and more layers of expertise. So I think that was a good thing. The other good thing is that now that we've moved to this data lake approach, where we can bring in all sorts of different kinds of data, we don't have to do all this transformation when we're loading the data, right? We don't have to do all this upfront transformation. And then rely on stored procedures and things like that, right? Instead, what we can do is we can land it in our lake, and that's the raw data. And then we can make some transformations to it, and then we make it a little better, and then we can transform it more, and then we can make it even a little bit better. And that full pipeline is persisted along the way. So that way, if we need to go back and say, oh no, like our dashboard, we need to add a new feature. In the past, you might say, oh, we don't have the data anymore because we transformed it. There was a loss of information in that process. No, you still have the information. It lives in the raw tables now, or it lives in the staging tables. So some good things happened here, right? There were 2 steps forward, but then the step back, going back to what you said, Juan, was I remember reading an article. I forget if it was DBT talking about their own DBT or if it was another company. I think it was DBT talking about their own DBT.
I think so. We got to go find that one.
And they wrote this article. It was on Medium, or I can't remember if Substack was around at that point yet. And it said like they were so proud about like, oh, all the data we've built out and everything. And they were like, we have 745 DBT models or something like that. And I was like, 740 DBT models. Oh my gosh. And they've only been building DBT. They've only been building it out for like a year and a half. And how did they now have that much? And what does that mean? 10 years from now, they'll have 7,000 data models, right? Like, to me, that was just astounding. And I think comes back to the fact that just because you can do this self-service approach and now you've democratized things, going back to the comment about a single version of the truth, or at least capturing all the relevant truths, right? Because there are multiple truths. Just because people can do whatever they want doesn't mean that the truth will emerge. Truth is not just emergent from democratized activity.
Now, in addition to all this data that has been moving, and I think this is something I call out all the time, over the last, I mean, here we're talking now like late 2019, or now 5 years ago, now more than 5 years ago, but 20, 30 years ago, it was still the same model, which was like, I move data, I store and compute data, and I use data. And I think that's something that hasn't changed over all of these decades. And I think that gives us a principle of what's happening. It was ETL, it was ELT. Now we see all that still there. It's still batch processing. It's still streaming. It's still moving the data. Storage and compute was a database, a data warehouse, a data lake. You're bringing in all these different types of things you can go. You want to be able to compute on. But it's still it's a database. It's a collection of data. And then we're using data. It's dashboards. Dashboards have changed so much. We're trying to go do machine learning models, and you're still using that data there. Those are three things. Now, something that was always kind of underneath the hood, never paid attention to, but it was during this era that it really kind of shined, was kind of the rise of metadata, data catalog, and governance. And actually, if we go back, I think what a group of the forward-thinking folks back in the big data era said, wait a minute, if we're going to democratize data, there's going to be a ton of data out there. We don't even know what's going to be out there. So that's why you kind of see the first versions of first catalogs, things like Apache Atlas.
Where's the good stuff, right?
Exactly. So there's Apache Atlas is like the first thing that come out. And so that's when they're quietly in there. Like, this is 2015s and stuff, but I think I'd interpret the history here saying, look, if we have the move the data, store compute data, and use data, and they're getting the shining, and this is also back, right? Pandemic. This is ZERP interest rates are going down. There's so much money that we need another category, and I think this is where we start seeing people getting hungry of like, wait, no, I'm create this category, this new category.
Hungry or greedy?
Hungry and greedy, because when you're hungry, you're greedy. You want to do more. You're getting really hungry. You want to do more, right? So you start seeing data catalogs and data governance, and then data quality and data observability, and then data, all these different data things coming in and out, right? Mm-hmm. And their own category. ETL, reverse ETL. You start seeing all these things. By the way, it'd be fascinating to go listen to the episode we did on reverse ETL a couple of years ago, and see how things have changed over that time.
Yeah. Tejas joined us from
High Touch. Yeah.
Good for them. They're doing really well now, but they've expanded. They're much bigger than reverse ETL now.
Oh, because I think they realized that was just a means to an end of technology, and now they're focused on
it's hard to build a company on a feature. You need to have a bigger value opportunity, right?
Exactly. So I think that's one of the stuff that happened from where catalog starts to come into this, because they're like, wait, we start to kind of fragment those kind of three pillars, and this stuff just gets super freaking complicated. So effectively, did the modern data stack help democratize more of the data, get it? Or did we just really create a bunch of more expensive toys that now the market is telling us that we need to kind of consolidate more on?
Well, again, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think one nice thing is that the UI has got a little nicer, right?
That's true. And that's something that we need to really highlight and celebrate, because I think that is a huge differentiator, which makes it easier for people, more enjoyable.
Yeah. And data ops became more a thing, right? A lot of these tools, they integrate with GitHub. They're configuration based, right? So I think we saw some good things happen here. But again, if the goal is to drive value with data and to create a better recognized set of versions of the truth, right? We're still swimming in chaos.
So what was the other thing that happened during that time of the early modern data stack?
So there
The
was
one and
a
only,
technical phenomenon, right?
the one and only data
The
mesh.
data mesh.
I remember first time I heard about data mesh was this was actually hilarious. It was actually a database theory professor in 20. It was before the pandemic. So I was traveling. I remember. I was visiting. I was visiting this professor in Belgium, and he said, "Hey, by the way, have you ever seen this blog post from Martin Fowler about data mesh?" Martin Fowler. I'm like, "No," and I start reading this, and I'm like, "This all makes so much sense." And like, and it's like, "Oh yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking." And like, we want to be able to more the social technical paradigm shift, and it's about federation, right? Um, and that was a huge that I think will go down in history as one of those pivotal moments in the entire data in the entire data industry, the data mesh. But it's hilarious. I don't know, hilarious is the word, but I find it fascinating how that hype of the term data mesh was it just went up so fast, and then suddenly it kind of go down, but the essence of it has, I think, so quickly we realized that it survived the test of time already.
I think that we, as a data community, were sensing that the modern data stack was making things too complicated. And it was just perfect timing that data mesh as this concept, it existed a little bit before, but it became popularized during this period. Um, it provided an answer to how we make sense of all this complexity, right? Because like we've got like how do I deal with the fact that I've got 100 tools? Well, the key is four keys, right? It's federated operational data governance, it's self-service data products, it's a data platform underneath, and domain stewardship, right? And so it's like, oh yeah, this is it. This is the recipe. This is how we manage 50 products in the modern data stack, is we just do a data mesh approach.
Yeah, and I think so. What was really important here is what is coming out, and I think is going to survive. The whole notion of data product is really for me the bringing product mindset, and I think this is how two steps forward, one step backwards, is that we're now making sure that we're by providing that product data product mindset is making sure that things are being connected to value. By the way, the chat is phenomenal. So thank you, Martin and Gareth and Sidon, the only people who are contributing here.
I didn't realize there was a book called F Data Mesh. Like I wouldn't go that far in terms of in terms of my concern about data mesh, but that is pretty hilarious.
So the whole notion of the product mindset, I think that's good. And Tim, like
you're an important thing that came out of that. Right. And and for some organizations, I want to make sure that we're not doing too much injustice to data mesh. I think for some organizations, especially if you're more of a software or a technical organization and you're producing a lot of your own data mesh is super interesting. I'll say, especially for those types of companies. But I think the thing that is very universally applicable is this idea of data products. Like I'm really excited that has emerged as one of the kind of shared agreements amongst the data community. Because, when we entered this data lake landscape and we started to say, hey, the purview of data is going to be very wide and the levels of quality of that data is going to be very wide, that we need to know what is the good stuff. And we need to treat it as though it needs structure and governance. And it is, I think the analogy that we've used in some of our past episodes, and I'll bring it up again, that's been very helpful for this, is you think of like when you go to Amazon, right? Or you go to an e-commerce site and you see those products listed there. That's the tip. That's the self-service tip of what's being provided to you in terms of this value chain. But there's this whole supply chain that made that product possible. And there are data products that had to come together to make that, products that had to come together to make that product. One person buys a laptop and that's what the product means to them, but then a laptop has a motherboard in it, and the average consumer tends not to buy a motherboard, but a laptop producer thinks of a motherboard as a product and they want to incorporate it into their product. And so this idea of products just provides such a useful analogy. and it allows you as a product person, I love this, right? Allows you to take what we do in software product management and apply that to data. It doesn't perfectly fit, but there's enough of a fit that it's very useful.
And the other thing that I see is the cultural shift, right? It's that social technical side, which I think people are now starting to really put more focus on. And this is why um, whenever I talk to people, data leaders, I ask them like, who do you report to? How is your work organized? How are like how things are cross functional and stuff? And I say, how much are you centralized? How much are you decentralized? And I think now having those conversations and realizing how that connects to the culture of your organization, right? So I think that's an interesting. These are the conversations that we haven't had before. So these are the step forwards around that. Um, I wonder what are the step backwards that we would be having now.
Steps backwards. Arguments in our organizations that have lasted for the last year about what is a data product. I think that's been a little bit annoying.
Oh gosh, so true. I think it's probably what 9 out of 10 times when we walk into something, we're like, "So data product. So what do you mean by a data product?" And everybody just laughs. It's like, yeah, no
Get a
one
group
knows.
of people together. Are they reusable? Does everybody agree? Data products are reusable. All right, cool. Reusable. All right. Are they governed? Does it have to be governed? I don't know. Does it have to be governed?
And then the other thing out of this too is the whole lately now these data contracts, which I think at the end of the day it's just part of like what is the agreement, right? You have a product, I'm going to go sell you something, or you're going to acquire something, and
Right.
we agree this stuff. I think that's part of that whole notion of the data products and things.
Right. For something to be a product, right? If you're gonna like going back to the Amazon analogy, right? You've got the return policy, right? It's something you depend on. If it says that this water bottle is 18 ounces, then when it shows up, it better be 18 ounces, right? If it says that it's made of metal, it shows up, it better be made of metal, right? And so these are contracts, either implicit or explicit, ideally explicit and documented. Coming back to catalog and governance, right? That is a data contract.
So what was interesting is that kind of if we look at this time, data products, everybody's talking about this, and then we now get the era of Gen AI, which is now 2-3 years old. It started ChatGPT, and I think the ChatGPT moment is where everybody realized, oh wait, we're not going to be able to chat with our data and ask all our questions.
Well, yeah, it started with, hell yeah, we're going to all be able to chat with our data, like, right? Like 2023?
And end of 2020, yeah.
Yeah. Where
End of 2022, November 2022, ChatGPT comes out. And I think over that December and December, basically, everybody's prototyping, figuring things out and realizing, oh, this could work. And then what we're seeing here is very quickly, I think in the first 8 months afterwards, there is the realization that context, that metadata, semantics, knowledge is going to get the light it has always deserved, in my opinion, because we're going to see this kind of division of like things that are cool and it works and probably even more consumer based, that it's okay if things are not perfect. Hey, if your Netflix recommendations is not perfect, doesn't matter. Nothing's going to happen. Well, it's going to happen to them, but I mean, in general, nobody's going to get pissed off or anything. But if you ask a question about some numbers, your revenue, your bank statement is incorrect, like that is very, very bad. So I think we start seeing the separation. We're starting to see that separation, and to make things to go work inside the enterprise, I'd argue that many people, most people are probably saying, yes, we need to go invest in semantics and metadata, which is just my position has always been. I think some other people are like still pretty not in that bigger of a, call it, of a governance camp. But I think that's but that's kind of evolution. I think semantics and knowledge graphs have been rediscovered. Now everybody is a semantic expert. Now everybody has a semantic layer. Everybody now talks about ontologies, which I'm happy because that's what I've been talking about for 20 fucking years. But
we've made the leap.
Welcome to the club, people.
Yeah, we've made the leap where I think, a skeptic in the past could have been like, knowledge graphs, I mean, that's really cool stuff, but like, we're not Google, we're not Netflix, we're not trying to build like a massive recommendation engine or search or something like that, which of course knowledge graphs can do a lot more than that, right? But like that was often the use case people would point to, right? Um, but now it's becoming a necessity because because AI applications uh, don't have access to trusted information or context. And I think if you look at this whole history, there's a cultural and a people aspect the whole way along this data industry, and governance, which is an aspect. And it's always been a little bit haphazard, right? Where it's been the most structured is when there was regulation that forced a company to have to comply. But more broadly speaking, governance and some of these cultural aspects around data have been a bit reactionary. And when you have people trying to do analytics, dashboards, etc., for people, you can kind of get away with not having your house in order. Because if you see a dashboard and you're like, I don't know why these numbers are saying this. Yes, you should have data quality. You should have, a catalog around it. There's all these things you should have. But if you don't, yeah, you can go Slack message somebody or Teams message somebody, right? Or you can set a meeting on somebody's calendar and it took you 6 weeks instead of 6 hours. And that's a huge problem, but you can get away with it, right? We can get away with it. We can be reactionary. Now with AI, we can't do that. And I don't know how many years away we are from it. Maybe it's coming soon, but AI doesn't set a meeting on your calendar entitled WTF is this dashboard and then hop on and ask you a bunch of questions about what the dashboard means. Maybe we'll get there pretty quickly. Maybe we should. But we have to actually establish a trusted foundation now, or else, we get stuck.
And so what I'm realizing right now, and kind of like, let's jump into. I mean, we got like less than 10 minutes. We do want to wrap up the hour, and I'm asking myself, where are we now with all of this? And so I've been really thinking about history, and I think this going through this whole exercise has actually made me realize, okay, what are the stuff that we know that have happened in the past? Remember, history, if it doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So what are the things that we can kind of get ahead of ourselves? Let's kind of predict the future. One of those things is governance, and we know that we turn the data. We're democratizing data. We democratized analysts. We're going to democratize the creation of all of these agents, and everybody can go talk to all this stuff. So guess what happened? All those turned into swamps, right? Into all those things turned into the, I don't know how many dashboards. We're gonna have the same thing inside with all these agents and these things. And then, but the thing is that as much as we don't want to say it out loud, but here to say it, like, yes, a lot of jobs are going to go away, and this is going to really suck, and this is going to be horrible for a lot of people. And but at least when people, like you just said, like I go talk to somebody and that thing, there'd be some sense of accountability. I can go talk to somebody. But now if less people are going to be there, because part of this whole goal is that you want to be able to do more with less, you're going to need to have accountability, understand where this comes from. And that's why governance is going to be so important if this agentic future is really going to pan out. And I think that's something we're going to go see. That's why, okay, get ahead, governance, semantics, knowledge graphs, like that's going to mean making sure that we're going to go trust these things. And arguably, if we don't do this, I think part of we won't really realize the true value that we can get out of this, true monetary value, because I know there's be effects for people. And that's something we also need to go figure out. So they think that's one side of the world that I'm seeing coming up next. And then I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I agree with that. I think that a problem that's going to persist is the cultural aspect around this, because like I feel like the technology, we've opened up Pandora's box, and I think some people are wondering, like, are we going to enter some kind of another AI winter or something like that? And I don't think we are. I think the promise is too large, and the technology we have today, even if it didn't evolve at all, even if it just stayed where it is, with agentic architectures, with data architectures, tying it all together. We're going to do some incredible things. The gating factor is going to be, how are we managing our own information, our knowledge, trust, data quality, data governance, which ties back to some of what you talked about. So I think that's going to be some of the biggest unlock for us over the next couple of years here, is actually putting that foundation in place. And I'm going to be an optimist. I think people will. I think it's going to happen. I think it's no longer possible to do it any other way, right? Like a user here just said, the stakes have changed and companies can't wing it anymore. So I don't know. That's where my mind goes. What do you think about that, Juan?
No, the question is always why now, and I think the why now is because of the whole promise of AI, Gen AI, LLMs, the agentic future, and it's just huge opportunity that if we're now justifying the reason to do this investment, that we haven't not been incentivized to do before, and now we're incentivized to go do this, and I think that's going to be more steps forward, and then we're going to have some steps backwards for sure, because we're not going to do it. Everybody's going to still hope there's a magic wand that will do this stuff and so forth. Hopefully we'll also be able to use the same technology to help do that type of grunt work in that middle. So I think that's something that I am hopeful that we're going to now really make that investment, that go to the gym and eat your vegetables, but at the same time have beautiful steak and cheesecake and wine, just be able to go balance all these things.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think Gen AI is going to replace everything. I think there are some folks who are thinking that Gen AI means that things like dashboards are going to go away. And I don't think that's true. I think it's going to make it easier to make dashboards. It's going to make it easier to trust dashboards. You can ask, "Hey, what does this mean?" Right? These things are going to help each other, which is good. And one of our guests that we're going to have this season is Sanjeev, right? And Sanjeev Mohan, and he talked about dashboards are still valuable, right? You're like, imagine you're in a car.
That's a good story I'm hearing from everybody.
Yeah.
There you go. Ask your car, what's my speed? What's my speed?
Yeah. Police officer pulls you over, and how fast are you going? Are you going to be like, Alexa, how fast was I going?
Actually, that'd be pretty cool to go do. But so I do. There's where are we now?
Check out that episode when it comes out.
So where are we now? One, we're seeing, I think, a bunch of convergence happening, right? I think there's consolidation happening in the market. We're seeing all of that right now. The platforms are putting together. I think we're gonna depend again. If we see through, we didn't talk about it specifically in this episode, but the pendulum has swung from a vendor perspective, right? And the pendulum is now swinging from all these smaller, larger companies that you're having to go deal with, and now we just want to consolidate into platforms, and you're going to have these platforms offer these features. But what's going to happen is that those platforms are going to slow down things. You're not going to innovate as fast, and they're not going to get everything right. And then people are going to complain, and they're going to see opportunities and startups going to come out of this and stuff. In a couple of years, we're going to see the pendulum swing again. This is the typical thing, and this is a huge opportunity. But I think right now is for any startup is to start thinking about, like, what are the big platform companies going to kind of screw up right now and get ahead of itself, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then I think tying it back to what we started was, this whole goal has always been, you do all this data work is to really, there's an ROI on it, because you're at the end of the day, you're going to increase revenue for the company. And I think what has happened, like if I were to summarize this whole discussion, what has happened inside of the entire data world is that we started saying we can put data together such that we can go find opportunities to drive more revenue. And we did that. And then we got credibility. The industry got credibility, and we started kind of thinking bigger and bigger and bigger, and focusing on the technology to be able to support that bigger view. But then at the end of the day, we kind of like always assumed that we were providing that value of finding that insights and getting to that insight faster. I really wanted to close with this comment early on that Garrett said, is that at the end of the day, you don't get value from the insights. You get value from the actions and the outcomes. And this comment right now is exactly what I'm starting to go see And obviously, I'm biased here, but I don't want this to sound salesy. But it's now being part of ServiceNow. I'm realizing that like as an action company, like at the end of the day, you want to be able to make sure that all of your people who are working in your different business units in different lines of business who are operating the business, like they get all their stuff to do their best work. And the insights that are happening inside of your data and analytics world, you cannot just stop at insights. That needs to be connected. Those insights need to be connected to drive action across all those different lines of business. And that is what AI, that's what we need to be using AI for. That's what the agents are going to be for. And that is how I have huge faith, and I hope and I know that we will, this is going to be the era where we're going to have not just 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. We're going to have hopefully 10 steps forward, probably a couple of steps more backwards, but we're going to have huge advancements on that. And it is the opportunity for the data community to really own that, to not just be truly mission critical for the entire organization, that every single line of business will say, I do not want to go to a world without how my data analytics colleagues make my life better.
Yeah, the next 5 years is when the data team goes from important to mission critical to how the business operates. And
with that,
also Excel will still exist, right?
That will never go away. Tim, it is such a pleasure and honor to keep doing this with you 5 years in. Let's keep going. And thank you so much for everybody who's been listening live. This will get posted in the podcast very, very soon. Sorry for everybody. Like, I know that like the Apple Podcast is not working right now and stuff, but thank you so much. We have an entire awesome program aligned.
We got some great guests lined up this season.
And cheers to everybody who's listening to us, because we do this because of the entire amazing community.
Yep.
Thank you so much, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.